What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Geek Pantheon. And today I want to talk to you about rules that you can steal from other games to really liven up your D&D game and inject some really cool ideas into it. Now, that's not to say there's anything wrong with the rules of D&D, although in my opinion, there's some blind spots. But having read a lot of core rule books and played in other systems over the years, there's definitely some rules that I find intriguing to pull into my table to just, shake things up a little bit. These do not apply to every game type. These do not apply to every type of campaign. But I think in the right type of game, they can do some interesting things to really allow the players to engage in combat in new and interesting ways, or just the world in general. So I have 10 rules that I think you need to steal for your D&D game. So I'm going to start by breaking these into categories, kind of broken up into what function they serve at the table. And the first one is going to be dealing with dice rolls. The first one is going to be from 13th Age, and it's the roll of the Escalation Die. Now, for those of you that have played combat in D&D, a very common complaint that I've experienced and I've heard from other people is that combat has the ability to drag on and take a while. There's some game sessions that are 3 hours long that feature one combat encounter. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if it's like the end of campaign, big bad evil epic showdown fight. But if your random encounter with some kobolds in the woods ends up taking 7, 8, 9 rounds, that can drag on for the players a little bit because there's no stakes in the combat. And the escalation die from 13th Age can really assist in this issue. So for those of you that don't know, the escalation die in 13th Age is where at the start of the second round of combat, so you do first round of combat as is. At the start of the second round, you take a d6 and you put it on the table with the 1 facing up. And all the PCs add 1 to their attack rolls. Not their damage, just their attack rolls, so they're more likely to hit. And then at the end of that round of combat, once at the start of the third round, you switch it to the 2 side. And now everybody adds +2, +3, +4, +5, and +6. And then at that point, it just stays +6 to combat rolls. And what this does is allows for a good ramp up of the freneticness of the combat and allows the party to really start wailing into people. Now, for a lot of you, you might think that gives a really unfair advantage to the PCs. And so obviously this wouldn't be something that you would necessarily want to apply to all combats potentially. If you are running a campaign where the players are the big heroes and it's swashbuckling, fun, adventure time, then sure, add it to every combat so that as things go on, the party gets more adept and they cruise through combat. One tweak that I would make potentially is saying maybe named combatants. So Kobold number 5 isn't going to get the escalation die, but Grumthal the Destroyer, the tribal leader of the kobolds, might. And so you could use it to ramp up that tension a little bit to where everybody's hitting and doing damage as opposed to swing, miss, swing, miss, swing, miss, which is, in my experience, a lot of the times that combat starts to drag is when the dice just aren't working with you that night. And so this gives you that bonus to where even if you're having a rough dice night, you're still going to hit in combat and can really keep the combat progressing forward. So that's a small tweak to the 13th Age rule that I might make is in their rule set, it's only the PCs. I might extend that to named villains. That way it just ramps up that tension a little bit, but your mileage may vary, so either way. Okay, so the next one is from 5th edition Shadowrun. This is the concept of timed skill checks. So obviously, if you're a dungeon master or a player, you've been at a table where there's been a check that is required for the continuation of the story. Really big mistake that I see a lot of new DMs make is having your whole campaign hinge on the party finding that secret door or unlocking the door that they're trying to get through. And that's just something you shouldn't do from like a campaign design standpoint, but that's a whole other video. But the timed skill checks concept from Shadowrun alleviates this problem, and you can continue designing your campaigns exactly how you have been. Just implement this rule. And the idea is that a player can make multiple checks to achieve the same skill. It's just the time that it takes is affected with each subsequent roll. So a great example is the party is at this locked door in this hallway. There's a patrolling guard that they've figured out the pattern, and they rush up to unlock the door. If the rogue in the party passes the first time through, they unlock the door, they get through, they're able to shut it, and nobody is aware. Oh, you failed that one? Okay, well, you hear the boot steps start to echo and get closer, and you see the guards start to turn the corner. So at this point, if you succeed, the guard is going to hear the door like creak shut. And so they're not going to see what happened, but they're going to hear a noise and maybe come investigate a little bit. Oh, you failed that one? Okay, the guard is coming down the hallway. If you succeed, you'll unlock the door, but he'll see some figures going into the door as it closes. But it'll be like amorphous, like he won't know, oh, there's a group of adventurers that went in there, but he's definitely going to check out that door. And then if you fail that one, okay, at this point, the guard is going to see you, and so you're just frantically like trying to get in the door. And so at that point, you now have, as opposed to a roll and pass or fail scenario, you've given the rogue 4, 5, 6 chances to get through the door, and that can ramp up the tension at the table and also create for some hilarity of like, there's going to be a time where you get 6, 7, 8, 9 rolls and you're not going to be able to unlock the door. And a good role player is going to be able to take that failure and make a really hilarious moment out of it. And inverse, it doesn't have to be like an immediate in the moment kind of thing. It could be making a history check. You're at the Grand Library trying to figure out some details needed for the campaign. And so the party wants to make multiple rolls. They want to find out this information. And so you can make it more abstract and narrative, like for every roll is 6 hours of research. And so you research for 6 hours on the first roll, you don't find the information. Okay, you can come back the next day and the next day, and in the background have the clock running for the plans and machinations of the villains, to where the longer they take, the worse the situation is going to be moving forward. But they're able to find out the information they need to find out for the campaign to move forward. So that's why I really like timed skill checks, is they provide the means to allow the party to succeed in a much more concrete way than saying, oh, you rolled and failed. Okay, well, it takes you a little bit longer than it normally would to find this information. This way, you have that concrete notion of it took you 4 rolls to do this. So that's 4 days. Or if they want to say, well, no, I want to say that I was researching 12 hours a day, so it's only been 2 days. It's like, okay, then you're going to have 2 levels of exhaustion because you haven't been getting enough sleep. You've been burning the midnight oil. And so you can have that negotiation at the table, but you get to use the number of skill checks it took for them to pass to inform that negotiation as to how long it took, what are the consequences, things like that. The next one that I have for you is from the role-playing game system Kids on Bikes, which if you haven't checked it out, on Eberron Renewed, my actual play podcast that I am the Dungeon Master for, we did a one-shot where Jeff ran us all through a one-shot of Kids on Bikes. I'll put a description down below for the first episode of that one-shot, but that was a really fun system. It's really cool and interesting and kind of unlike anything I'd ever played before, being set in the 80s and playing as teenagers. One concept, one rule from that game that I really like and I really think could have a place at a D&D table is the idea of adversity tokens. The idea being that when you fail a check, when you try to do something and you fail, you were given an adversity token, signifying that things did not work out for you. And you're able to use that in the Kids on Bikes game to get a +1 on your next roll. Or there are some abilities that are also fueled by spending your adversity tokens. So you could take this into D&D and have it be a form of inspiration. Like you get these tokens, you can spend them to get advantage on a roll in the future. Or if you want to get really inventive, you could create some abilities for different classes or racial abilities that are fueled by adversity tokens. And you can say, okay, for 2 adversity tokens, you can do this thing. Like you could use your dark vision to see through magical superior darkness or something like that if you want to get real crazy with it. But just down and dirty, getting it on a table for D&D, I would absolutely just have it be a form of inspiration. Like you failed this check, here you go, moving on. Now the only downside is Kids on Bikes has a lot fewer checks than D&D does. So I would probably amend it a little bit to say if you fail a check by 5 or more, or 10 or more, like you really catastrophically fail, like the idea of the character internalizing this failure and promising that they're going to do better next time. And so you could tweak it a little bit to say either you fail within 5 or you fail by 10 or more, or whatever works for your table. But I really like the concept of failure driving characters to do better. And I think that's what adversity tokens represent, is this failure pushing the character to do better and be better, and you get to reflect that in the mechanics, which is awesome. Okay, so the next one is a really common one, but for those of you that haven't heard about it, it's primarily shown in the Fate core system, although I believe Savage Worlds also has a concept like this, but it's the idea of success at a cost. So the idea being that if you roll and you fail, you have the option to still succeed, but it costs you something. And so this idea obviously is very similar to the time skill checks of trying to solve the problem of what if you need the party to do something and they fail, or the party really wants to do something, like they would all like to make that perception check to find the secret door, but that's going to take an unnecessary amount of time. So you try to manage the table and say, okay, this person can make the perception check, and then they fail, and then everybody else is disappointed. The idea of succeeding at a cost: you fail your check, but you can negotiate with the game master to succeed, but something negative happens for your character. And the way that I would play it with D&D is basically have that sliding scale of you just barely missed it. You failed by less than 5. So it's going to be a minor cost. It's going to be a temporary thing that is going to provide a mild nuisance. So the idea, if it's like a chase scene and they're running and you have somebody make an athletics check to hop over a log and they fail by 2. And it's like, I would really like to just be able to keep running. And it's like, okay, well, let's say you twist your ankle a little bit. You land funny on your ankle as you leap over this log. So the remaining acrobatics checks for this encounter, you're going to have disadvantage. And so then you can move on. And once the encounter's over, it's not a long-term thing to where it's like, my character lost an arm because I failed by 2. But as things scale up, if you have somebody fail a check, let's say hypothetically by 15 or more, it's like, okay, if you want to succeed on this, we need to start talking about something that is going to have ramifications long-term in the campaign, some big cost. And so you could have that sliding scale. And that'll be more of an art than a science as a dungeon master, of figuring out what failure by 4 looks like versus what failure by 6 looks like, and trying to negotiate that with your players. But I think that's a really great way to mitigate the failure, and it's more interesting. It's more interesting than just saying you don't lock the door. It's, okay, you unlock the door, but you broke your thieves' tools. And so you can't attempt to unlock any more doors until you can get back to town to take care of that. Or if you don't want to just take an entire skill set away from them, come up with something else that is an annoyance, but not going to debilitate the character for the rest of the session. So success at a cost, I think, is really cool. A lot of systems do it in different ways, but Fate is the first system that I encountered the concept in, so they're getting the shout out here. So yeah, bring that to your table, and I think you can find some interesting moments of negotiation between player characters and the GM to navigate that and find a way that this character can continue on with their intended action while giving up something in the process. Okay, so that's 4 down, and that's all of the dice rolling mechanics that I had in mind. Now we're moving on to character creation. So the idea being with these is, how can you tie a character that you're creating to the rest of the party and to the outer world? So first off, I'm going to be talking about icons from 13th Age. 13th Age showing up again on the list. Good job. So this is the idea of most game settings. Like, I play in Eberron primarily, and I could list off easily 12, 13, 20 characters that exist in the world that could qualify as an icon, like somebody that is massively important in this world. And the concept with 13th Age is you get 3 relationship points that you get to attach to different icons in the world. And you can have a positive relationship, a complicated relationship, or a negative relationship with them. But the point being that you can call upon your relationship at different points in the game and have something happen. And the more points you have assigned to the relationship, the bigger the thing could potentially happen. Now, in 13th Age, it involves you rolling d6s. And when you roll, if you roll a 5 or a 6, something good happens. With a 5, it's complicated. With a 6, it's just a net when it's good. And I honestly think you could probably just pull this mechanic whole cloth into D&D. We use D6s, not as much as 13th Age, but I think it's elegantly simple, and I don't know if we need to try to reinvent the wheel with this mechanic. So the idea being, identify those iconic characters in your setting. Good, bad, that you should have, if you're doing this, some iconically good characters, some kind of shady, neutral, middle of the ground characters, and then some outright villains. for your players to pick from. And so they could say, I have a negative relationship with this villain because I'm actively trying to work against them. But when they call upon that relationship, something happens that can benefit the party, but it reflects that negative relationship. If the party is being arrested, the town guard is finally caught up to them. They're like, we don't want to kill the city guard for just doing their job, so we're going to allow ourselves to be caught. The character with a negative relationship with one of the villains of the setting can roll, and if they roll a 5, then it's a complicated success. So bounty hunters show up, trying to get that character on behalf of the villain and disrupt the arrest. So it gives the party the opportunity to get away, but because it's complicated, the bounty hunters are going to chase the party off the scene. If you roll a 6, then the bounty hunters come in, the city guard jump in and start fighting them, and the party can get away scot-free. So that's kind of a more complicated version of it. But I really like that concept of giving a mechanical thing in every player's hand. In multiple things, if they spread out their 3 relationship points amongst 3 different icons, giving them something that they can influence the narrative in a really cool way by rolling on the relationship die and potentially having something awesome happen. And then additionally with the icon system, you can have players roll at the start of a session and it kind of inform on a 5 or a 6 if those relationships are going to play a part in the session, which kind of relates to the next one that we're going to talk about here in a second. But then also when the party confronts one of these icons, you have the players roll their relationships. And if it's like a villainous relationship, then maybe that character has some useful insight in that moment that they discovered in their past. Or if it's a positive relationship, maybe like, things are going to go better than they would if the icon didn't know anybody in the group. And so it's a really cool way to cement the player characters in the world and establish these relationships that they have with the iconic figures of the setting. But like I said, the next one is kind of related, but in a less iconic way. And that is Obligation from Fantasy Flight Game's Star Wars role-playing game. So this concept is very similar to a table in Eberron Rising from the Last War that's titled, Why Does Your Character Owe 200 Gold Pieces? And kind of what drives your character that they need to make this money to pay off this debt. But Obligation is a bit more abstract. We're actually using this in our second campaign for Eberron Renewed, where every character selects the thing that either drives them or can provide complications in their life, or both. Actually, always both. Because the idea is that with Obligation, it's assigned a score. So we have 4 players at our table, so everybody has 10 obligation points. Now, when they're creating their character, they can take more to get more gold, gear, things like that at character creation if you're converting it to D&D. In the Star Wars game and in Genesys, XP works differently so they can earn more experience. I wouldn't recommend that concept for D&D. But if they want to have a super awesome sword, say, sure, yeah, you borrowed more money from this thing that is your obligation, so we're going to give you 10 more obligation points where you start at 20. So once you have all this stuff established, whether it's their obligation is their family, or they have a bounty on their head, or whatever, the recommended rules as written says at the start of a session to roll to see if you trigger anybody's obligation. And so if everybody has 10, 20, 30, 40, you roll on a D100. If you roll above a 40 in this instance, nothing happens. Session moves on as normal. But if you roll within the range of one of the players, their obligation is active for that session, which means something happens related to it. A bounty hunter shows up to collect the bounty in the middle of the adventure. A family member comes asking for gold and needing help. Now, the way that I do it, I house rule it to where I don't roll at the beginning of a session. I roll at the end of the previous session, because then that gives me time to plan my next session and incorporate the obligation into it, because that just works better for me, and it has less potential to completely derail hours of planning that I've done for a session because I rolled a 5 on a D100. So I would recommend doing it that way, but it's super fun. It, once again, gives your PCs motivation and drive and connects them to the world. I think this could work in conjunction with icons. I think you could have both of these systems working at the same table and they wouldn't necessarily conflict. I think they can work together. And you could even have obligations tied to icons. And so you create this weird web of like, well, I have a positive relationship with this icon and this other PC owes money to this icon. And so what does that mean for my relationship with that PC? Which then gets us into the next rule that you need to steal, which comes from Dungeon World. And that's the idea of bonds. So bonds in Dungeon World happen at character creation, and every class has a list of options of bonds. And it's just like a sentence with blank for the subject of the sentence. So and I used to fight in the army together, and they saved my life once. And the idea being that you develop these bonds with other members of the party. And in their system, they have you roll with plus bond on certain checks to like aid or assist. If you wanted to have a mechanic advantage in D&D using this, then you could say if you have a bond with this character that you're fighting alongside, like in combat, if you are within 5 feet of a character that you have a bond with, you get advantage on a roll. That might be a bit too easy to exploit, in my opinion, so you might provide some context. So one of the ones for Wizard is so-and-so is going to change the world. I have foreseen it. So maybe that doesn't apply to combat, like being within 5 feet. But we served in the army and they saved my life. Maybe, or maybe like once per short rest, you can use it, take advantage of your bond to gain advantage on a roll. Yeah, that would work without being too overpowered. But I really like the idea of bonds. And once again, I think you could slot all 3 of these into your table with icons, obligation, and bond, and create a really great web of relationships, not only internally within the party, but within the larger world, to give you as a dungeon master some great ideas on adventures. Because at the end of the day, all these are doing is giving you more tools to work with, to build interesting adventures and encounters and scenes. I think these 3 are great. And definitely in my next table, I'm going to try to incorporate all 3 of these into the game. Okay, so the last 3 that I have for you relate to encounter management is kind of the idea. So the first 2 deal with one very specific part, and then I get kind of abstract with the last one. So the first one is from a game that I've read quite a bit of the rules, but I haven't gotten to get on a table yet, and that's Shadow of the Demon Lord. So the rule that I want to steal from Shadow of the Demon Lord is the initiative system. So they use a fast turn, slow turn initiative system, which is really cool, where essentially if a player or a monster is going to only use their action on their turn, the fighter is already where they want to be and they're just swinging their sword, they get to take a fast turn. If somebody wants to take a full turn with an action, move, and bonus action, or just an action and a move, or action and bonus action, anything other than just an action, that's going to count as a slow turn. And so with the way Shadow of the Demon Lord does it is initiative breaks down into PCs taking a fast turn, NPCs taking a fast turn, PCCs taking a slow turn, NPCs taking a slow turn. And then you just go that way. Now that has the potential to give quite a bit of an advantage to the PCs in that regard, which some DMs might not like. You want to have the more tactical feel, but you want combat to run a bit smoother. So you like this idea, but you don't like the innate advantage of the PCs always getting to go first. An idea that I have seen out there for adapting this is to have everybody roll initiative at the top, track their scores, and then use the initiative scores within the fast turn, slow turn hierarchy. So everybody taking a fast turn goes in their initiative order. Everybody taking a slow turn goes in their initiative order. So you can have the monsters and PCs intermingled. So that's an idea to tweak it a little bit. I enjoy the simplicity of the idea of just fast turn, slow turn, and repeat. And you could even create like a monster property. Like if you want to show that this monster is faster than anything the PCs will ever come across, give it a property that says when taking a fast turn, this monster acts first. There you go. So now it's like, wait, no, what? We get to go first. Well, no, this one is so quick, you can't. And then if it's going to take a slow turn, it goes all the way to the bottom because only on a fast turn does it get to go first. Those are some ideas that you can take to kind of tweak this rule to make it fit your table. But it's a really great, simple initiative system to where you don't have to roll, you don't have to bookkeep. You just say, okay, who's taking a fast turn? Okay, now I'm going to go. Now who's taking a slow turn? Another initiative system that I have used at my table that I really like to bring in from another system into D&D is the non-assigned initiative slots from Fantasy Flight Games, Star Wars role-playing game, and Genesys. And the idea being that everybody rolls initiative and you record who rolled what, but the roll is not attached to the character that made the roll. It just designates a PC slot. So you have like 2 PC slots, an NPC slot, 1 PC slot, 2 NPC slots. And so that adds an interesting flavor of tactics of, okay, who's going to go first? Okay, you want to go first? Okay. And you can kind of get a little meta with it because so many things are until the start of its next turn to where it can be like, okay, So this thing is going to be affected by this until the start of my next turn. So I'm going to go last next round just so we have as much time as possible to mess with this thing. So it adds a fun mechanic to the game that people have responded really positively to. So yeah, I would really recommend checking that out and trying it out at your next game session to see how it feels for your group, because in my experience, players really like the level of strategy that it affords them, being able to pick and choose who goes when and how to manipulate their powers and spells and stuff surrounding the ability to delay their turn until the end of the round. Okay, and the last one that I have is still in the encounter management category, but it is Flashbacks from Blades in the Dark. For those of you that have never checked out Blades in the Dark, it's a fantastic role-playing game that you should absolutely go check out. It's all about heists and, well, not all about, but that's a heavy part of it, which is where the flashback mechanic comes in. And so I wouldn't allow this all the time, but if the party is trying to break into a mansion or do something that has that Mission Impossible kind of feel, I would definitely bring this mechanic in to the game. And so the idea with the flashbacks is at any point, a PC can say, I would like to engage in a flashback. And it's them explaining how before they were in the place that they are now, they took care of something. So if they're trying to get into the demonic ritual and the cultists asked to see their tattoo, they'd be like, okay, I got that tattoo. I looked up what the cultist tattoo was supposed to be and I got it. And so it'd be like, okay, give me a streetwise check to see if you could ask around and figure out what the cultist tattoo looks like, or a knowledge religion check to see if you could figure that out. And whether or not they succeed or fail, maybe they got the wrong tattoo, but they get to do that. And there is a sliding scale depending on how dramatic the party wants to be with their flashback. Basically, like looking at the rules of Blades in the Dark and trying to transcribe them to D&D, it would be like something innocuous, like, oh, I asked our ally NPC to get here a little bit before us, so they're sitting at the table waiting for us. That's not going to require a roll or anything. It's very minor, so that has no cost. With Blades of the Dark, they have a mechanic called stress, and that's the resource that you can use to make these more and more powerful. What I would do is I would use hit die. Like, it's going to cost you a certain amount of your hit die the more dramatic your flashback is. So something like the cultist tattoo, where it's going to be a single check to figure it out, then that would probably cost you 1 hit die. Like, okay, you have a hit die, so when you take a short rest, you're not going to be able to use that one. And then as you get higher and higher and requiring more and more checks, that's when you get into like 2-3 hit die cost. Now, the one big rule is it's not time travel. So it's not like the constable rounds the corner and confronts you. It's like, I want to engage a flashback where I killed the constable. It's like, well, no, the constable's here, so you can't do that. But did you give him a bribe 2 days ago? Okay, let's make that check. Yeah, you can't like alter something that's happening right in front of you. But if the constable hasn't shown up yet, you could absolutely then say, okay, I want to go back. Well, not go back in time. I want to do a flashback to go kill the constable. Okay, let's do that. It's going to cost you probably 3 or 4 hit die because that's a big deal, but let's do it. And so that's a really cool way for the party to be able to do something really cool and interesting and be afforded the opportunity to retroactively say, well, I did this thing, to retcon their planning phase. And the reason that I love this so much, it can eliminate the planning phase. You can just say to your party, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's the mechanic we're using. What this means is we can start right now, and at any point, you can say, I'd like to engage a flashback because we planned for this. And it's like, great. Okay, what does it look like? Okay, that'll cost you 1 hit die, and you get to move forward. So you can eliminate the sitting around the table for 2.5 hours, planning their epic entry where they get in and get out without anybody noticing it, and then 10 minutes into the encounter, they've been spotted by guards and are in combat. So that's the main reason I really like this mechanic. Okay, so that was 10 things that I think you should steal from other mechanics and bring to your D&D table. Let me know what you think down in the comment below. Were there any mechanics that you really love that I missed? Should I do another one of these 10 more? If I get enough suggestions down in the comments, I might. So yeah, let me know what you thought, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and like this video. That's a huge help to the channel in getting us to grow, is if you just take 2 seconds and hit the thumbs up. It's a huge help. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.